Good evening, everyone. Hey, it's Gina, and we are in for another live session this evening. How's everyone doing today? So I'm doing well. I've been doing a lot of different things this week, trying to get my neurographic specialist certification finished. There were some things that I had to do on that. I've been working on evening, Michael. Thank you, Scott, Sly Fox, for being here. So I've been working on all of the conference stuff. And so I've been doing the schedule for that, getting the website finished and revamped. So there's actually two websites. There's a website that we created, and then it's the main platform that the conference will actually take place on. So we have to make changes at both places. And so that's just been a journey in itself. So as of right now, we have 2 keynote speakers, 27 breakout and workshop sessions, 10 pre-conference sessions. So the first 2 weeks leading up to the conference, there'll be different speakers that lead different groups at different times. So, morning, afternoon, evening to kind of get a bunch of people in and things like that too. So I'm super excited about that. The topics that we will be sharing are absolutely amazing. I have to get my stuff off the printer. I apologize. So it'll actually be amazing. So again, if you're interested in learning some more about that, it's riseupfromtrauma.com. And so what I would like to say, I should have started this off, so I apologize. Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans, past, present, and future. I just want to say thank you for your sacrifices, your unselfish sacrifices of putting your life on the line for our freedom. So from my deepest portion of my heart, I thank each and every one of you for your service. So tonight, I talk about this a lot, but I just thought it would be something that would be interesting. Tonight, we're going to learn about why CBT and TF-CBT are not effective for complex trauma survivors. This is a huge, I actually, when I did this, it's interesting because when I picked this topic, I didn't even know it was Veterans Day. And so this actually kind of goes hand in hand with what complex trauma survivors, excuse me, which is what, if it was on the DSM-5, which I look for it in the very near future. If it was on the DSM-5, which is what they do to bill your insurance company, veterans, that's exactly what you would have is complex trauma. It's the flashbacks that seem real, and also it happens over. It's not just one event; it's several. And so because it's not on the DSM-5, they just classify it as PTSD. And so tonight, what I want to talk about is why CBT and TF-CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, why those do not work for somebody that has complex trauma. That's a trauma survivor that has complex trauma. And so let me just kind of give you a little bit of information about what it does. So CBT is a tool that helps with cognitive reframing. So cognitive restructuring, if you have negative thoughts, negative thinking, intrusive thinking, negative bias, negative inner critic, that's usually what rises up. And so what cognitive reframing is it actually helps you take that negative thought, the intrusive thought, all of those things, and reframe it into positive. Although that's great, as we all know, but it really does nothing for us because the trauma is in the body, not the brain. And I've talked about this several times. We've talked about Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. But I just think this is really, really important because so many people go to therapy thinking that CBT and TF-CBT really works. And for certain instances, absolutely it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. But when God told me at the beginning of the year, it was me against 1 in a million, I had no idea what on earth he meant. And as I started doing these YouTube lives and as I started getting my conference underway, it finally dawned on me and it clicked. I can't believe how many people, you can agree to disagree with me, that's perfectly fine, but I cannot believe how many people are conditioned and trained to believe that they would never heal from something that they've endured. If you put the hard work, the dedication, and you do what you're supposed to do, you ultimately can overcome the challenges that you face. I am living proof. Uh, I don't like to say too much of my lives, but I am going to say this. I endured 11 years of extensive abuse from the age of 4 to the age of 16. So it was about 4.5, 5, so about 11 and a half years or so. Um, and I was probably abused almost every day of my life. And so I had a lot of classic symptoms that I didn't even know were even trauma related. So 2 years ago, yeah, about 2.5, 3 years ago, I took a test. You can take a test, and I actually had PTSD and CPTSD. Last year, I took the same test. I had none. I have low anxiety, so I was able to lower my anxiety. I've never dealt with depression, but I no longer had CPTSD or PTSD. Um, because our youngest, um, she's having some issues. Um, or not our youngest, sorry. Our I was thinking, wait a minute, no, not our youngest, our son. And so we were trying, he's not our 12 years, but a 19-year-old. And we were just kind of like going through family history. And so I took another test to see, like, am I autistic? Do I have Asperger's? Do I have CPTSD? Do I have PTSD? Do I have mood disorder? Do I have bipolar, borderline personality disorder, like the whole kit and caboodle? Because I was diagnosed with severe mood disorder, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, extreme anxiety. Um, and so I took it 2 years ago. I was fine. I took it again about 2 weeks ago, and I don't have any of that anymore. There are times that my triggering does, but I'm working on it. But what I'm trying to say is this: is if you work with the right therapist, if you work with the right coach and they have the right healing modality for you, you put in the hard work, you have the drive to put in the hard work, you will actually heal. When God told me that, again, I had no idea what he meant. And so here it is, me standing up against 1 against 1 million to try to change the minds of people to say, you know what? I'm living proof that you can overcome challenges if you just put the hard work into it. It's hard. That's why people don't like to do it. Um, and so I want to go over the 6 steps as to why CBT and TF-CBT are not effective for complex trauma. The after effects of the after effects of childhood trauma come back as an emotion, not as a behavior. And so unexplained pain, if you get pain in your shoulders, pain in your gut, if you have digestive issues, we've talked about this, a lot of different areas, your hands, feet, legs, they swell, and you go to the doctor and they're like, look, exactly, pharma makes big money off of, cancer patients. They make money off of everything. And so that's exactly what it goes back to, is that, a lot of people don't realize, but when your doctor writes a prescription, they actually get a kickback. I don't know if you know that or not, but they do. That was one thing I learned when I worked in a doctor's office. It was pretty interesting to me. But it's the emotion that drives the behavior. It's the emotion trapped in your body that actually drives the behavior of what's coming out. Same thing when you're triggered. When you get triggered, a lot of times what ends up happening is you become angry and you have those anger outbursts. You start running your mouth. Or I like to say spewing at your mouth, because that's sometimes what I do. And then I have to catch myself and say, oh, wait a minute, no. Like, because I'm training my brain, I'm becoming aware of what is my trigger. CBT and TF-CBT work on the mind, not the body. You cannot change the mind without healing the emotion attached to the trauma response. So what ends up happening is they're not looking at the root cause, they're just looking at the symptom, being the behavior. So, your behavior is the bipolar, the borderline personality disorder, the intrusive thinking, the negative thinking, all of that type of stuff. They're not technically looking at why. Why are you having those types of symptoms? Why are you having the mood disorders? Why are you having the highs and lows of crying? Why do you feel horrible? Why is your brain ruminating? All of those types of things. And so please don't think that that I'm trying to put down therapists, because they're very needed. I did 25 years of therapy off and on from my 20s to my 40s. And so I actually loved my therapist, but I knew it was time to go when I asked her if she knew what complex trauma was. And she said, Gina, I don't. I knew then that that there was only so far I could go with her. And so I healed more in 6 months of working with my trauma coach than I did in 25 years of doing therapy. And so, again, I'm just on this mission to bring truth. This is just through my own education, through my own life experiences, through the neuroscience and everything else that I've learned. And so, like I tell everybody, hi, Preston, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot cure, treat, diagnose, prescribe. I can't do any of that. But all of this is just things that I've learned over the last 3.5 years of being a trauma coach, really digging into the neurobiology, the neuroscience, the trapped emotions, that are trapped in our physiological, what happens to the brain when the prefrontal cortex and the neocortex, all of that stuff. And so this is stuff that I have extensively studied and things that really have helped me shift out of working on not my mind, but my body. And so I did write the book, Trauma to Transformation. And so I had to go back and I had to change some things in that because the things that I'm learning and the things that I've established, realizing you can still work on the mind, but also you have to work on the body as well, because that's where the triggering is coming from, is the body. Hi, Heather. And childhood trauma survivors, the neocortex, specifically the prefrontal cortex, is underdeveloped or it's fully not engaged. So what ends up happening is that when you go through childhood trauma, your prefrontal cortex does not develop until you're about 25, 26. Well, then when you've had trauma later on in life, the same thing. So your prefrontal cortex and your neocortex is like kind of right near it. What ends up happening is you stay in survival mode, which is the trauma mode, the trauma self, instead of being an adult self. So what ends up happening is that when those are underdeveloped and they're not fully functioning, CBT and TF-CBT rely on the prefrontal cortex to actually work, because that's where your logical thinking comes from. And so for clients to navigate the logical aspects of examining their thoughts, their emotions and behaviors, if this is not fully engaged, you will not know what's fully going on. And so one thing that you can do to get your prefrontal cortex and your neocortex actually re-engaged, you're on YouTube. YouTube is full of all kinds of information. Look up trauma-informed movements, and it's a 3-part movement. And so what it's doing, if you like to sing, if you like to dance, I like to have dance parties in my office, in my cabin in here. So if you like to have dance parties, go for it, because what you're doing, it's the movement and the breathing. And it's kind of like usually you move things like alternately, like this. And then you're moving your whole entire body. But then if you're singing in the process, if you can handle it, you're usually inhaling very deep and then you're belting out those tunes. So what you're doing is you're giving your lungs a workout, because so many trauma survivors breathe up here. They don't deep breathe. So if you don't learn to start deep breathing down on the lower part of your lungs, you're going to lose your lung function. And so dance party, I love it. I could say trauma-informed movements, but if I tell you to have a dance party, most people be like, yes, I'm all for it. Even if it's just a couple minutes every day, and work your way up, you will notice a huge shift. And then what'll happen is when you start having these trauma responses, that the trauma-informed movement will automatically kick in. And what it is, it's your body's response. It's the prefrontal cortex engaging during whatever's happening. So it's a pretty neat process that definitely, if you do have complex trauma, would be something that I would highly recommend. And so then when your prefrontal cortex is not engaged and you can't examine your thoughts, your emotions, and behaviors, what happens is the client experiences emotional dysregulation or emotional numbness. And that means that the emotional dysregulation is that you don't know how to self-soothe. Emotional dysregulation is when you're crying, you're sad, you're angry, you just can't regulate your emotions to the way that you would like to. Emotional numbness is when you don't feel your emotions. And so it's kind of interesting with both of those, because I was a very emotional numbness type of person. I couldn't cry. I had this very hard facade. Like I I wouldn't crack. The only time I would crack, if I was really, really, really ticked off, that's the only time I would probably cry. The only other time I have cried is when we had some issues with one of my sons, and that brought up a lot of my abandonment wound, and so that I did cry. But other than that, like emotional numbness, I just acted like a complete badass. Excuse my French, but that's exactly what I acted like. And so I've been doing the neurographica art since June. And what a difference. Like I could cry at the drop of a hat now. I'm watching movies that I watched like 20, 30 years ago and didn't bother me. Like I'm watching movies and I'm trying to hold back the tears because I don't want to cry. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like what on earth is going on? And so neurographica art, I've invited each and every one of you to draw with me. I will do a session with you for free. Literally, I am seeing a huge shift with drawing because it taps into your subconscious without taking ketamine, psychedelics, anything like that. So it's a natural way to tap into your subconscious and actually rewrite the narrative. So you're working in your unconscious, subconscious, unconscious, and conscious levels. And since doing that, I can feel the release of the trauma off of my body. And so if you're interested, just let me know. And so by doing that, you work on your emotions, because when we work together, I ask questions during a certain process, and that certain process that we're working on is where change takes place in the subconscious. And so you're subconsciously, your body is working out the trauma. You don't know what's going on or what you're doing. But when we do a release, you may tell me, oh my goodness, Gina, like, and all of a sudden you just might start crying because it's uncontrollable. But what's happening is your subconscious knows what those neural lines mean. And when you're doing, when you're rounding out all the jagged edges, when you're rounding out all the conflict, what ends up happening is that's when it starts giving you, it's kind of smoothing out. And so that's when it's repairing and rewiring your neural pathways that have been damaged from that trauma. And so it's a beautiful process, absolutely amazing. So again, if you'd ever want to try it, just let me know. I actually, another thing that I've noticed too is weight loss. I'm down 23 pounds. I'm not really doing anything different. I'm just drawing. So I really believe that it's associated with the drawing that I'm getting a lot of those trapped emotions out. So my body can heal differently. So it's just pretty cool how all of that works. Number 3, CBT and TF-CBT uses the top-down approach, which is not effective for complex trauma because the client is in perpetual survival mode. So the top-down approach, which means is they work from your mind all the way down. So your mind, your psychological into your physiological. You can't do that with somebody that has complex trauma because it makes it hard for you to process your emotions logically, and for your emotions to make sense. So why are you crying? Why are you upset? Why are you feeling sad and mad and, whatever? And so what ends up happening is sometimes they just don't make sense because they're not working on the right areas at the right time. And then what ends up happening is you become retriggered and then re-traumatized in your session. So if anybody has CBT or you're doing CBT and TF-CBT with your therapist, and you notice that you are re-traumatized and re-triggered, that's probably why you have probably emotion dysregulation or maybe some emotional numbness that you probably need to work on. And you need to work on the physiological, not just the psychological. Number 4, it does not address the complex trauma. CPTSD has a broad range of signs and symptoms. Most therapists, they don't know what they are because it's not on the DSM-5, so they just haven't had the opportunity, or they don't take the time to read about it because it's a non-diagnosable done on the DSM-5. And so with CPTSD, if you're a survivor of it, the healing comes from working with both the body and the mind simultaneously to help clients understand where the reactions are surfacing from. So again, Like I like to tell clients that, or not clients, sorry, what I like to say about this is this. And anxiety, I guess, works both ways. I was thinking about this afterwards, but it does work both ways. Sometimes your body will get anxious and all of a sudden your mind will start ruminating. And so that's the body's response to something. And now your brain is saying something because it feels, your body is the first thing to feel it, the threat or the danger, because your body is always scanning. That's what survival mode does. Your body's always scanning. It's kind of like tunnel vision. Your body's always scanning for threats and danger. Then all of a sudden something happens that triggers your brain and it triggers your body. And then when your body gets dysregulated, and then a thought will happen. Or so that's why it's important to work on the physiological. Or what ends up happening is that you can get a thought, and if you let that thought control you, that's when you'll have a response in your body. That's why it's really important, though, to work on the physiological before you work on the mind. Because if you can get the body under control and you can sit with that uncomfortableness for a little while, you'll end up understanding why it's coming, where that trigger is coming from, what's going on, and the whole 9 yards. So it works better. And so, at the end, I'll kind of tell you what we do in coaching and what neuroscience and neurobiology has found to really work, which is pretty interesting. It doesn't separate adult self from trauma self. And so this is where your brain is acting on trauma self. Everything that you're doing, every decision that you're making is coming from your emotional state. Impulses. How many of us impulse? Well, I don't anymore, but I used to. You make impulse decisions. And so that is why you act on your emotions. Impulse is emotionally led. It's an impulse. You feel sad. So, like me, I've shared this story before. I had a negative attachment to jewelry, and I had no idea. And if my husband would not buy me jewelry, he can attest to this. If he wouldn't buy me jewelry, I would throw a fit like a 2-year-old. I've said this before. I think this is the first year in almost all the years we've been together. We've been married for 21. I don't know how long we've been together, 24 years, almost 25. I don't know. You lose count after a while. And so I'm sure he'll correct me in the chat just to be a wise guy. But anyway, in all of the years that we've been together, I don't think the jewelry card has ever been paid off. And so my impulse was, when I became upset, became dysregulated, I had to go buy jewelry. And so I never put anything together until I started sitting down one day and I said, oh, I have a jewelry addiction, like seriously. And this is why. In my childhood, when things would go south, the apology would come with jewelry. So there was a negative attachment. And so to feel good, I got jewelry, or per se. So in my adult life, going through trauma self, like trauma brain, I thought, oh, I can buy jewelry and it would make me feel better. Realistically speaking, was it? No, it did for a little while. What happens when you go shopping? You have an impulse and you want to go shopping, and all of a sudden you go into Macy's or Marshall's or something. And all of a sudden you spend $500. You walk out and you're like, man, I spent $500. I should really go return that. But here, let's flip this. What about you guys? We'll see. What about you guys? Because I know I have a lot of fishermen on here. What about you guys that walk into the fishing store and you just spend $1,000, and then you walk out and you go, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't have bought that. I probably should just take it back. But you don't. But then you feel guilty for days. That's impulse buying. That's exactly what it is. You end up getting this euphoric feeling when you do the shopping, but then you have shopper's guilt thereafter. And so that's what they talk about, separating adult self from trauma self. Because if you were in adult self, some of those things wouldn't be taking place. Some of those, the impulse shopping. or, there's other things. There's impulse shopping, there's gambling, there's other addictions and things like that too that I won't discuss here, but I'm sure you guys know all about those. So there is a lot of different impulse things that we do. And so, yeah, of course, the chat's quiet because nobody wants to tell on themselves. See, I'm telling on myself. You guys don't even want to tell on yourself. That's all right. That's okay. I'll let you guys slide this time. All right. It does not address the after effects that is causing the dysregulation. With CBT, the mind is not the factor that drives the nervous system to dysregulate. It's the unprocessed, unhealed trauma sitting in the subconscious and the body. The body remembers and has reactions from these events stored deep in the subconscious. There are only a few modalities that can tap into that area, and I use one of the safest, most gentle ways, which we talked about, is neurographic art. It's releasing the past without reliving the past. And so what ends up happening is you have a feeling. I got to look at my paper because I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't make out what that is. Oh, well, it's fine because I'm like, man, what is that? I think it's feeling, and then you have an emotion. Yeah, I think it's feelings, emotion, and trauma. And no, I would feel real bad. Yeah. See, same. I mean, it's, yeah, because that was part of the addiction. And so that's exactly, you're right. I mean, and you would. So feelings, emotion, and thoughts. And so it goes from feelings, and then that's where like your reasoning, logical, your reasoning, your logic, planning, problem solving, memory, focus and attention, developing and completing tasks, stopping impulse driven behaviors, personality development. So it goes from feelings, emotions, and thoughts. So that's the cycle. So you get a feeling, it comes out with an emotion, and then a thought. And so that's what ends up happening. So what CBT and TF-CBT fails to recognize is that the psychological and the physiological, which is the cellular level, we talk about this, it's the body, the systems, the after effects of complex trauma are embedded deep inside our amygdala in the limbic system. Try to say that. Sorry. And so that's another part of our brain. And so the amygdala sits about here. You got the prefrontal cortex, and I believe like the limbic system is like what's around it. But anyway, when your amygdala is hijacked, what ends up happening is you stay in fight or flight constantly, which is another survival mechanism. So your anxiety is going to be all the time. You're going to feel nervous all the time, or you're going to want to flee. You're going to want to run away all the time. So it's like fighting, giving you the adrenaline and giving you that cortisol dump, which is not healthy. Or you're going to get the, for both that and the fleeing. And so that's why another reason that it's not effective is because it doesn't work on, it works on working on the symptoms, the after effects of trauma before working on the cause, the triggering events and circumstances. So that's what causes the nervous system to become dysregulated. Sorry, I got to take a drink. So it's the dysregulation that drives the dysfunctional thoughts and behaviors. And so when your amygdala is hijacked, you can't control that because it's kind of stuck. So your brain is stuck. And so that's why the trauma-informed movements, the progressive muscle relaxation, the neurographic art, those are all three good things that actually help. And I'll tell you why, why that is here in a second. And so this approach fails to realize is that when you're dealing with a client that has CPTSD, the negative beliefs and behaviors are surfacing involuntarily from being triggered. So same thing when you're triggered. Like I said, you're triggered. And then all of a sudden, you may rise up with anger, with a lot of shame, with a lot of guilt. And so those are things that are surfacing involuntarily because there's an attachment somewhere, the triggering, it's inside your body somewhere. So that's why. And so these are the real symptoms of the after effects of what you're experiencing, the after effects of your trauma, the after effects of the event, the after effects of your circumstance. And so it's sitting literally in the physiological, in your cells. That's where the unprocessed and the unhealed trauma is sitting. And so that's what drives the negative thoughts. It drives the mood disorders that actually mimic the dysregulation system symptoms. And so when I started researching like borderline personality disorder, bipolar, and like I did a chart, I can't think of what those charts are, but where they overlap, I can't think of what they're called, but they overlap. And so when I started looking at those and things like that, I started realizing that a lot of the symptoms of both of those, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, they actually overlapped with complex trauma. And so, that's why it's really, really important for providers in the in the mental health industry to really understand what complex trauma is, to really understand what the signs and symptoms are, because it affects, your cognitive, your physiological. There's so many different things, developmental, social. There's so many aspects of it that it does, go through and can really have a lot of symptoms, the negative symptoms and things like that too. So it's for these reasons alone that CBT and TF-CBT do not work, again, for clients that have complex trauma. It's not an effective healing modality. And so I'm going to shift for a minute and tell you exactly what is. And so just because that certain thing is not, and the reason I bring that up again is because so many people are wondering, why do I go see a therapist? Why do I go see a counselor? Why do I go see a social worker? And it's the same thing. I just don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. And I'll ask them, so what are you doing? And they say CBT. And I'm like, well, that's probably what it is. And so they are great. I know I'm kind of on the last ladder of the chain. But nonetheless, what I do is just as important, although, they have a lot more of the, they deal with a lot more of the major things, the major signs and symptoms of things. And so we deal more with the trauma and things like that too. So they're needed, we're needed. But I just feel like people that have complex trauma need to realize that it's working on the physiological and the psychological together. You have to do it. And so the approach that we use is called the side door approach. And so what the side door approach is it's more effective. It's incorporating the trauma-informed movements, the progressive muscle relaxation. And so it's bringing in using the side door. And so what that means is that we're not doing traditional things. We're trying to do like non-traditional fun things. But what it does is the side door approach. Gabby, she was on our live. She does a lot of, she does waltzing, self-defense, wrestling. There's a lot of different things. It's about movement. You have to move, trauma release exercises, thematics. And so what that is it's coming in and saying, okay, we're going to work on both through the side door. So the side door. So if we do, so let me look at it this way. If you do the, from the top down, what do I have to work on first? The mind, right? So you got to work on your mind. Then you're working on your physiological. So if I work on the bottom up, then what am I working on? I'm working on the physiological and then the psychological. Well, we know that won't work either because you have to work on them together. Simultaneously, you have to work on them. That's exactly what the side door approach does. You come in from the side door, and when you do, you're literally working on everything, not only the psychological, but the physiological. And so that's exactly what you need. So if you're somebody that has complex trauma, or PTSD, that's what they're calling it right now, and you've endured childhood trauma, you're a war veteran, you have been to war and seen things, did things, whatever, this would probably be a huge, huge factor for you with working on why the ruminating will not stop. And so what ends up happening is that when it comes into the side, you're working on excreting all of that trapped stuff that's in here that's driving this. This remembers this is what's driving it. So as soon as something happens and your body remembers, that's when you become aware of this. What was I doing? What was I watching? Who was I around? What did I smell? Maybe what did I taste? If you walk into an establishment and it's the same thing, that's when you have to analyze what's going on. That's how you become aware of what's going on, what's triggering you, what is causing the ruminating thinking. Because the ruminating thinking, it's coming obviously from things that we see, things that we hear, things that we smell. And and a lot of times, seeing, watching, and things like that too. And so when we come in at the side door, we're working on we work on everything, not just the mind, but the body, vice versa. Da 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 da. So when you do dance party, when you do trauma informed movements, when you do neurographic art, when you do progressive muscle relaxation, when you do trauma release exercises, somatics, like they have somatic exercises. You can try breath work. You can try mindfulness. Those are all thigh door approaches, because not only does it work on your body, it's working on your mind together. That's what you're looking for. You need something that works on both of them together, because it starts eliminating the trapped trauma from all of your cells, from the physiological. I had cognitive distortions for quite a while. And I was actually embarrassed to talk about it because I had the catastrophizing. It was really bad. And so I've shared this before, that my when I have a thought that comes to my mind, my thoughts are like pictures, and it's called imagery. I should have looked it up before I got on here. I've talked about it before, but imagery something. And so mine literally, it played like it would play a movie, and I would have a thought, and literally, like, I would play a movie as if it was just happening right in front of my eyes, like something really bad was happening. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, and it's the hardest thing to overcome. And by doing the side door approach, by doing the trauma informed movements, the progressive muscle relaxation, by doing some breath work and mindfulness was huge. By really looking at what was triggering me, I believe those are the things that really helped me. The neurographic art, I started in June. Yes, there are some changes that are taking place, absolutely. But it's one of those things that when your brain starts getting used to one, you have to change it up. So how is some of the things that I can recommend for you too is this. If you're right-handed and you're making a pot of, let's just say, macaroni and cheese, whatever, we're just going to say macaroni and cheese. When you start making the macaroni and cheese, don't use your right hand, use your left, and watch how difficult it is. And here's why. Because your brain is so used to you, because you're right-handed, so your brain is so used to you stirring with your right hand that you don't think twice about it. You can stir, you can carry a conversation, you can look around while you're doing it, look around, you could probably be on your phone while you're stirring, and you don't think anything of it. Try doing it with your left hand and see what happens. It's probably going to take you a while to start stirring with your left hand before you feel comfortable enough looking on your phone, doing whatever you're doing, or kind of looking around, because now your brain is on guard going, oh, wait a minute, this is new. We haven't done this before. We have to be careful. We have to be cautious because we might burn ourselves. But what you're doing is you're actually repairing your prefrontal cortex and your neocortex, which is literally getting you out of survival mode back into thrive mode, adult mode. And so your amygdala will stop being hijacked. So that's what that is all about too. And so I do practice a form of cognitive restructure, but we do it in a different way, where we bring in everything. So I do it from the psychological and the physiological standpoint of things. And so we've talked about the body keeps the score many times. And so it's finding the root cause in the it's finding the root cause in the physiological to heal the psychological. That is why working to identify triggers with clients is very, very crucial. And that's why I started doing that with my clients. We don't look at the root cause to go back and re-trigger and re-traumatize. But what I like to do is look at the root cause of look at what's going on and try to find the root cause. So then we can identify, look, you may not have, this, and this, but this is where, can you see where, there's a pattern? where there's a pattern why you have what's going on with you. And chances are that's probably what's causing the dysregulation. It's causing maybe the emotional dysregulation, the emotional numbness, the dysregulation somewhere else in the body, the amygdala hijack, how you're feeling. Your emotions are all out of control. You got highs and lows. One minute you're happy, the next minute you're sad. One minute you're happy, the next minute you're screaming. So those are all things to take into consideration. And so using the bottom up or side door approach is to healing is more effective, but the side door is the best approach. And so these side door interventions appear to possess the potential to help guide complexity traumatized individuals towards a more integrated awareness and processing of unresolved trauma, of your symptoms and reactions. And so what it does is it resets your thinking, resets your feelings, and it helps your brain, and it releases the stronghold of the complex trauma in your body. And so when it comes to the trauma-informed movements and the progressive muscle relaxation, the progressive muscle relaxation is more of a relaxant. And so that's where you'll start at your toes, you'll work all the way up to your all the way up to your head. That's one good thing to get all of the trapped trauma. You can start doing that. It's going to take a while. It's not like it's going to work overnight. So that's one thing. The trauma-informed movement, same thing. That's just doing the movement. It's the movements to get it out. It's the movement and the stretches that actually start depleting it from your body. And it's a thing that you have to do every day, a couple minutes a day. What I like about the neurographic art is that while you're drawing and the emotions come up, it's literally releasing the emotions in your drawing, which is releasing them not only from your mind, from your subconscious, unconscious, and conscious level. It's releasing it not only from the mind, but it's releasing it from the physiological. And so that's what I love. So that just to give you an idea. Breath work is another good one. Breath work works with breathing. And so it works on your mind and it works on your breathing as well, which is part of your physiological. Mindfulness, same thing. Guided meditations. You can do guided meditations. There's a lot of them on YouTube as well. So you can use them. Let me see. I'm trying to think. And then trauma release exercises, that's another one. And what you do is you work your muscles to the point that they shake. So like if you don't have to do trauma release exercises, if you work out, you can just, you put your muscles, you work out until you can't work out anymore. So hiking is a huge thing. We had Jen Fisher on here, and she's the solo traveler. She does a lot of hiking. She sits in the woods and does a lot of hiking. And so one of the things she recommended is that you go and you hike or you walk. And what you're doing is you're depleting all of that stress, all of that built up anxiety, all of that built up, the trapped emotions and stuff that are actually within your body. And so, hiking, walking, things like that. Now, fishing does work, but here's the thing. It needs to be a little bit more extensive. So fishing is a wonderful thing. Here's why. Fishing gets you out in nature. Fishing gets you out where you just need to be. You listen to mindfulness is huge when you come to nature. Mindfulness, you're building mindfulness when you're fishing. You listen when you throw your lure, whatever that word is. Sorry, I can't never get it right, but throw that into the water and you hear it go plop. And then you hear the line of your fishing rod, and you can hear it zinging. You can hear birds chirping, crickets cricketing. Might be able to hear toads, those types of things. So what you're doing is you're building your awareness, of your mindfulness of what's going on. And when you start doing that, it really makes a huge difference. So being out in nature. So whether you're fishing is huge. You are doing kind of the 3-part movement. But try doing it with your other hand and see. You'd probably, and then take some videos so I can kind of giggle at you. But yeah, paddling against the wind. You're right. If you do have a paddle one, absolutely. Paddling against the wind for 3/4 of a mile is working out. Absolutely it is. That's the workout. you keep throwing out that rod. Absolutely, you're going to work out, but you're really only working out one arm. So, yeah, you're throwing it and then you're doing it. But I'm just saying it does work, in a way, and, casting and reeling in and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is your brain's used to that because of what hand you're using. So your hand, so you're used to that. So switch it up and see if you can do it the opposite. Most people can't because it's new. But the more that you do it, the more you'll be able to do it, if that makes sense. But, kind of wearing yourself out and things like that. And, not to the point that, you're exhausted. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to release a lot of that trapped anxiety, a lot of the trapped emotions, because here's why. Another thing I'll discuss, because it does go along with using trauma-informed movements and what we're talking about this evening is, when you are stuck in fight or flight mode, and and you feel anxious all the time and you don't work it out, what ends up happening is that, what did you say? Oh, I don't want to hook myself so I don't cast left-handed. Well, I know. And I'm, and that makes sense, but I'm realistically speaking, if fishing is wonderful because you're out in nature. I'm not saying that, but it's getting the mind to do something different is what it is. It's getting the brain to focus on something different and do something different. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to change up fishing or anything like that. But I'm just saying, if you do something different with your other hand and stuff like that. Now I just lost my train of thought, so I apologize of what I was just going to say. Yeah, I hate when that happens. Anyways, anybody have any questions? Comments? See, Sly, you interrupted me. What was I talking about? Oh, I know. Never mind. Don't need your help. So when it comes to when you have anxiety, that's trauma brain, by the way. That's what happens. When you have anxiety and it stays, what ends up happening is your body's always constantly in this threat danger mode. And so your body's constantly dumping adrenaline and cortisol because you're always in fight or flight. And so where do you think that adrenaline and that cortisol deposits? Back in your system, back in your physiological. That's why that's why trauma survivors, that's why they have, I'm sure, whatever your ACEs score is. If you've never did your ACEs score, I would highly recommend it to your adverse childhood experiences. You don't have to, but if you do, but what ends up happening is it redeposits back into your body. And yep, Heather, that's why, definitely walking to where you're tired. We've talked about the trauma-informed movements, progressive muscle relaxation, the somatic movements. Those are really key. Here's why. The cortisol and the adrenaline that you dump redeposits back into your body. And when it does, it wreaks havoc. So then you start having lung disease, heart disease, gut issues. Your legs can swell. You have unexplained pain because what it's doing is it's poisoning your body. So a lot of times people that have trauma survivors, the cortisol and the adrenaline will sit within their stomach. So sometimes you'll see people that have, and I know diabetes can cause this, and that's another thing, diabetes, your belly can be bigger. And the reason is because cortisol is dumped and it stays within your gut. And the adrenaline is dumped throughout your body. And so when you don't run and you don't flee and you don't work that off, what ends up happening is it stays within your systems and then it starts wreaking havoc. And so what you need to do is when that happens, you need to start working to get it out of you, whether you're doing jumping jacks, running in place, whether you're just doing dance party, something, because what you're going to do is you're going to try to excrete it from your body, which is really what you need to do. Otherwise, it's really going to wreak havoc. and stuff like that too. And so when you start working on changing, the mind and the body together simultaneously, that's when the healing actually starts taking place, as far as really working on the limbic system, and the amygdala hijack and all of that stuff, and the prefrontal cortex. It all up here works together, and all down here works together. So then it starts flowing, and it starts working together, and all of that good stuff. So it really makes a huge difference doing the side door approach than just doing one. And so, do we have any questions? So really, paying attention to what's triggering, what's causing you to have bad anxiety, what's causing you to have the adrenaline and the cortisol dump. Because if it constantly happens, you can actually have what's called adrenal fatigue, and that's where your adrenals, they kind of just go into this like hibernation mode, and they just kind of stop working. So then you become very, very fatigued. And you run on kind of overdrive. And so that's one of the more severe side effects of it, is adrenal fatigue. Your cortisol levels, again, when those shoot up too, there's a lot of different health issues, health concerns that can take place in there. And so one of the things, just education is key, coming from the neuroscience and the neurobiology aspect of things. And so that's what I try to do week after week, is just to educate and let people know, look, these are the things that don't work. These are the things that do work. But ultimately it's up to you. One thing might not work for somebody. It might work for, one. So, just to kind of give you an idea. So, is there any questions, any comments, anything like that? And anything I went over? Do you have any questions about it? I'll wait and see if we have any. Next week, we will have our guest next week is Vincent Castellanos, I believe is his name. And so Vincent is one of our keynote speakers at our 2025 Trauma and Mental Health Conference. And so he's going to be coming on. He's actually a former actor. He starred in I can't think of the few movies that he starred in. Oh my goodness, I should have wrote it down. He'll tell you anyway. But he was a Hollywood actor. He starred in a few movies. He left Hollywood, and now he is an addictions coach. So he still lives out in California. He travels a lot. A really big advocate for addiction, and that's who he works. So he will be on The Crow. Thank you. Yeah, he was on The Crow. And a couple other movies, but an amazing, amazing man. And so I'm honored and to have him on here and to have him present with us on stage. He's just a phenomenal, very, very wonderful guy. And I can't wait for you guys to meet him and, and things like that too. I will have all of his information up tomorrow. So just make sure that you like and subscribe. And if you'll do that, I always forget to say that, if you will, like and subscribe, share. And why I push so much on sharing, it's not because I want to get monetized or I do these for this or anything, like that. Although that is a benefit, but that's not even why I do these. The money I could care less about, really. But why I like to have you share is because you never know who's on your friends list, who is on any of your social media platforms that's a trauma survivor, or there's a family member of a trauma survivor. And so many trauma survivors, because of the stigma surrounding mental health, are so afraid, especially with the systemic barriers that are coming in, pertaining to race, pertaining to culture, ethnicity, gender. There's so many different reasons why people don't want to go get, help for mental health. And so I do these week after week after week with myself, with bringing on guests, is because there's so many people out in the community that, because of the systemic barriers that we have going on, they don't feel comfortable going and getting help. And so there's a barrier there. And so by doing this, I'm hoping it can shed some light to give them some tools and resources that they need to help them on their recovery journey, to kind of help them steer them in the right direction, on their own personal, journeys as well. So I would highly encourage, if you could please share it. That would really mean a lot to me. I would really appreciate that as well, because you never know, if it just takes one person to see the video. That's what these are all about. It's all about education, bringing in the neuroscience, the neurobiology, the life experiences, and things like that too, and just helping people. That's exactly what it's all about. So I'll give it another second or so. If anybody, I don't think anybody's going to have any more questions or anything like that, but. Again, I just want to say thank you to all the veterans, past, present, and future, because there will be some coming in. Just to say again, thank you, a heartfelt thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you've done unselfishly to sacrifice your own life, and things that you've done for our freedom and our life. And so we could never thank you enough for everything that you've endured and things like that too, for all of us. So, our hearts go out to you, and thank you so much again for sacrificing everything. So I will see you next week. If we don't have any questions or anything like that, we will see you next Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern. We will have Vincent. He's a former Hollywood actor. He was in The Crow. I want to say there was another movie, but I can't think of what it was. And so Sly Fox said, yes, thanks to all our veterans. And again, you can feel free to message me. If you have any questions, you can message me. If you're interested in the conference, it's riseupfromtrauma.com. Go there, look at all the speakers, all the pre-conference, everything's there that you need to know. If you are a trauma survivor or veteran, we do have codes, scholarships available for you to get in. It's $100 saving, so you can reach out to me for that too. And so again, I thank each and every one of you for spending an hour with me. I truly appreciate everyone for being here. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening, a blessed rest of your week. And we will see you back here next Monday on another episode of Healing Strategies with Transformative Healing. Good night, everyone.